Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Seed to Forest. In this episode, I, Gaurav Gupta, Chief Growth Officer at Step Foundation, will be talking to Azeez Gupta, co-founder at Rocket Learning. Azeez is a distinguished leader. His organization, Rocket Learning, focuses on catalyzing early childhood education and community engagement so that young children can become school and life ready. In this conversation, listen into Azeez unpacking how they made choices to reimagine learning, how they came up with a business model which really helps them scale very fast. And also look forward to listening to Azeez talking about the methods that they use to drive community engagement and the kind of inflection point that they saw as things unfolded. I learned a lot in this conversation, and I hope you do as well and unlock a few possibilities for yourself. Happy learning. Hello everyone. Today I have with me Azeez Gupta, who's the founder of Rocket Learning, which is not-for-profit in the space of improving learning of children in early age, and especially helping them with opening up their imagination, as well as in terms of what they can generally do in life so that they can grow better and do better in life. So Azeez, first and foremost, welcome and thank you for making time. It's a pleasure to be talking to you today.
I'm excited to be here, and thank you also for the very nice introduction that you did about work. I think that encapsulates it perfectly. So I will be borrowing some of those words as well sometime.
All right. Sure. A pleasure. Thank you for that. So Azeez, you are a business world 40 under 40. You are a Harvard graduate. Before that, IIT Delhi. And of course, fairly young. So what led you to start Rocket Learning? I mean, let's start with that. And maybe, is it connected to any problem that you saw and you felt deeply about? So just walk us through that. I think that will be really useful for everyone.
Sure, Gaurav. Absolutely. I've been interested in social impact and solving difficult problems that plague low-income populations in India, bottom of the pyramid users in India for quite a long time. I grew up in a civil servant family in sort of smaller town, Punjab. So I was in this unique position where I was lucky to get the best sort of education, but also could see the reality around me, could see the poverty and the lack of facilities and opportunity around me. And so I think that was a pretty unique experience growing up. I think within my family also, there was a right amount of, being aware of the issues, but also optimism that something could be done to change it. And I think the combination of both to really want to strive in this space, right? Too much of either is going to not work. So I was always interested in what I could do. And I think education always has stood out to me because I feel that if you want to really empower somebody to change their life for the better and long and sustainable way, then education is really core to that, right? I mean, there are a lot of other important things, but often they act as bandages or they help to solve a problem that has arisen. But if you want to take someone from their particular life trajectory and fundamentally change that, education is very critical for that. So I've always been attracted to this space in that way. I spent time at McKinsey in the early part of my career. And then post that, moved to Pratham, where I spent several years as part of the national leadership, running large-scale programs, first for vocational training, in fact.
So while you spoke about the why behind starting this, what's the extent of the problem? What do you see as really missing in the space which should really be solved for?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem that we are looking at solving is to ensure that there's an equal foundation for all 3 to 8-year-old children in India, right? And today we know there's a lot of surveys, etc., that have shown that in grade 1, more than 50% kids can't read or recognize a single letter or number. And what that leads to over time is that in grade 5, 50% of the children in the country can't do basic subtraction, division, reading even a simple paragraph. So, and then over time that culminates even more. I think fundamentally, though, what we see, it sort of leads to, is that a low-income child, say from a village or a rural slum, from a family which is in the bottom 50% of India, is being told fundamentally at the age of 6 or at the age of 8 that no matter what you do later, if you are going to be far behind your higher income peer because you haven't been stimulated. So your fundamental IQ is lower, right? Your other gross motor skills, fine motor skills, some of those essential things are also lower. So you can work as hard as you like. You can be as dedicated, but just at the core of it in life, you're always going to be behind. And so they're not, often school readiness is talked about for preschoolers, right? A good preschool education has readiness for schools. and for foundational literacy and numeracy. But I often like to sort of say that it goes beyond that to life readiness. You're never going to find a functional adult, right, who doesn't know how to, that, red is this color, this is blue, this is green, right? Or this is big, this is small. But learning it at the right age, having that cognitive and physical and mental stimulation early on is going to change your fundamental brain development, the development of neurons, the connections between different parts of your brain, and your ability to absorb things for life, right? So I think that's the big problem that we're trying to solve, that help kids become sharper, smarter, build a foundation early on so that they can actually have the opportunity to succeed as much as their higher income peers.
So that's fascinating, right? Because the connection of school readiness or learning that skill at the right age to being life ready is really important, right? And that's what shows up later during the years. In fact, I recall reading, and there's a lot of research around it, that 80% of the brain's development happens at a very early age, right? And hence these things are really critical. Now, so Azeez, walk us through the journey in terms of how it unfolded. What were some of the early days of Rocket like?
So we started Rocket Learning actually in June of 2020. So this is right in the first few months of a raging pandemic. We started trying to figure out what we should do and mulling over ideas. We are a team, in fact, of 5 co-founders and now a team of around 120 people working on this issue. All of us had backgrounds in social impact from earlier, and we had seen some key developments in the space and some things that nudged us towards the beginning foundations of the model that continued to grow over time. I think a few things. One was that there wasn't too much focus on school education, 3 to 6 year olds, even though there was a lot of research, as you mentioned, that this is actually a super critical time period, but nobody was looking at it. So there was a big white space and nobody was really looking at it. There was nobody with solutions in that space, right? So we started thinking that this is a place where we could actually contribute value. Surveys came out that year that showed sort of 70%, 65% plus of children going to government schools in rural areas have a smartphone. Right? In urban areas, it's closer to 80 to 90%. For teachers or Anganwadi workers who we work with, it's closer to 90% to 100%, right? So this was a massive shift that happened over 3 to 4 years with a lot of the telecommunication that's being talked about. And so what we started seeing that we would be able to do things that were not possible even 3 to 5 years ago. So instead of trying to do, say, slightly, a lot of organizations focus on saying that our content is slightly better than what is there earlier. Our ways of teacher training are slightly better than what's there earlier. So for example, using digital to send daily nudges to teachers and parents, creating a model where the self-help group that was physical always can actually become digital and real time and daily instead of meeting from time to time. So I think those opportunities we saw, and we felt that not enough people are working on it because people don't really feel that people haven't absorbed how much digital has sort of crept up in lives, even of the low income, right? So that was another big factor. And there were a few other design principles. I can come to those later, but things like, for example, how do we create peer communities? How do you use the government system? So there were certain non-negotiables that had arisen out of our previous work that we really wanted to keep at the core of it. But so those were some of the inspiration, but we really felt that the time was right from a policy perspective, from a digital perspective, from what was possible to really imagine things in a very, very new construct and build models that are going to be relevant for 20, 30 years.
So now, Azeez, as you speak about this new construct, right, you spoke about the fact that one has to really reimagine versus just trying to be better at something that else is already doing, right? It's not just about the content being better, training of the teachers or Anganwadi workers being better, but reimagining what needs to happen. And hence, what's that new construct in the space? So to just walk through that, what emerged within that?
Yeah, so let me actually go through what our model looks like, right? So that, then I'll try to sort of deconstruct that into saying, hey, we feel the design of that model is good and so on. Overall, what we do is to engage parents or teachers to be able to do simple activities with their children at home or in school that will learn. So I think one fundamental thing that everyone knows, more or less, is that simple activity, games, play done with objects around you is going to help in learning. So that pedagogy is pretty clear, that school of thought is pretty clear. The question is, how do you get that to be implemented? Right? If the world doesn't know how to help children in preschool learn, right? There are great models out there. It's just we haven't figured out how to get low-income parents or government school teachers, Anganwadi workers to actually implement this. And so that's the problem statement that we tried to solve. How we decided to do it is first we in fact concentrated on parents. I remember that there was a pandemic happening, so school was shut anyway. So that actually helped us to some extent to develop this. And we said that, we'll go to a district and there are 2,000 teachers in the district who are teaching preschool, right? Either through Anganwadis or through schools. And we will ask them to make a WhatsApp group of the 10 parents of the kids in the classroom. Right. So in that way, that's how we started. We started with around 2,000, 3,000 of these groups, each of which had around 10 parents on these groups. And it's a fairly simple task for an Anganwadi worker even to create a WhatsApp group and add a few parents on that. In fact, often they even had these disseminate information. So that was one of the key things, right? What is already happening? Can we use that rather than trying to implement something else, right? In fact, that was a part of a design decision to say that we'll use WhatsApp app. And we'll use smartphones that are there rather than try to distribute tablets, because we felt that the scalable thing is what people are already going towards, which is having their own smartphones with some data and WhatsApp. And then we said there are 2,000 such groups. Can we create simple digital activity-based content that can act as a demo to these parents that they can do at home? And for that, what we decided some design principles. One is that you should be able to do each and every activity with materials in the household around you, because expecting parents to go out and buy stuff is not going to be possible at that low income segment, right? And time and money makes it impossible. Second, it should be vernacular and local language, and it should not be written. It should be vocal. So it should be a video that can demonstrate and that anyone can do, even if you're illiterate. And that's where actually working with the 3 to 8-year-olds is useful, because you're not teaching advanced physics. So you're not worried that the parent won't be able to teach it. Like activities we do are, for example, you have different types of pulses. Alag-alag daalein hai aapke paas, ghar pe masar ki dal hai, tur dal hai. Unko mix karo ek bowl mein. Ask the child to then separate it out into different bowls. Something that anyone can do, but it teaches essential color recognition, sorting, pattern match, of those things. And then take a photo or video of that and send it back on the group. So two-way करने की कोशिश की कि we are going to send you some demo every day in the morning, 2 activities that you can do. It'll take you 30 to 40 minutes. Do it, take a photo, video, send it back. And we found that powerful. Rather than a one-on-one model, we could have done this every individual user को आप ये सब चीजें भेज दो. But for the group construct powerful because there are some early adopters in any sort of edtech or any tech model, right? So 1 out of 10 early adopter होता है. अगर 1-on-1 भेजोगे तो 1 person ही adopt करेगा. As it is, वो 1 person adopt करके वापस group पे कुछ भेज रहा है, right? And उसको देख के 3 people in that group are seeing कि look, my neighbor who is as illiterate, as time scarce as I am, is actually doing this. तो मैं क्यों नहीं कर सकता या कर सकती, right? And so they also start sending back, and then this community peer effect happens where there's inspiration, social inspiration, right? This is derived from the self-help group theory. Okay, if people around me are doing a particular thing, then I'll also want to do that, right? And we're saying कि there's so much negative that has happened from social media and these social groups. Can we actually use it positively? And so that was there. And the piece of the jigsaw was that the teacher is on the group. Right? It's not as if हमने उनको बोला है कि कोई ऐप डाउनलोड कर लो and then हम ऐप और बच्चा बात करेगा, right? मतलब app and child will talk and that's all there is to it, right? The teacher in the group, she's seeing what the parent is posting back and she's saying shabash beta. In Marathi she's saying khub chan, and that creates this positive encouragement and effect as well. So overall we believe that in edtech we started realizing that in edtech, like one-on-one model, एक computer एक बच्चा जाके देखेगा कुछ करेगा, that doesn't work so well. And so if you have a peer community with parents, with a teacher facilitator, good tech front end is what we call it, right? WhatsApp front end and sophisticated back end. Because the final piece in the jigsaw was कि once these peer effects have kicked in, teacher की वजह से कुछ वापस responses आने लग गए हैं, we are storing those responses and using that and back report cards with smileys. We are sending back badges and certificates. So we are gamifying it and making it fun for the user. So ये सब चीजें अगर मिला लोगे, तो then we believe it provides what we call AIM to the user, AIM, A for awareness, I for information and M for motivation. And we feel ये तीनों मिलके होंगे तभी कुछ होगा, right? मैं जिम रहा हूँ, तो first I should know I have to become fit, right? Then I should be told कि ये set of exercises आप कर सकते हो. बट वो कई बार मुझे मिला हुआ है लेकिन मैंने कभी किया नहीं है बिकॉज मेरे साथ कोई दोस्त नहीं है जाने वाले एंड कोई इंस्ट्रक्टर नहीं है जो मेरे को इनकरेज कराए, राइट? एंड सो वी सेड कि fit all these 3 pieces of the jigsaw, only then will it work. Just giving information and saying कि आप कर लो, वो नहीं होने वाला, right? And that's what most education interventions are. आप कुछ information दे देते हो और कहते हो कि आप इसको करना चाहिए लेकिन कोई कर नहीं रहा, टीचर नहीं कर रहे. So that's the model.
No, Azeez, in fact, that's very beautiful because in this, in a way, what you also articulated is how in this model you are leveraging what's abundantly available. तो जो एग्जाम्पल में बोला, राइट, कि उनके घर में दाल होती है, राइट, कुछ खेलने के लिए चीजें होती हैं जो घर में नॉर्मल स्टैंडर्ड ऑब्जेक्ट्स हैं, राइट? तो हाउ डू यू यूज दोज ऑब्जेक्ट्स व्हिच आर एनीवेज देयर इन अबंडेंस इन ईच होम and leverage them to get them to do activities via which children learn and develop those skills. So that's one really beautiful thing coming out of this that I see. The other thing that I also noticed in this was how you were very conscious of not trying to make people do something which is very hard for them to change, right? And hence going with looking at typical behaviors of people, like if they're very used to using WhatsApp, then it's not about trying to give them a solution which is very different, but using WhatsApp and the typical peer behavior, social inspiration that they get via that to actually engage them more and more. So, and in fact, it's linked to what we call as a bit of a +1 principle. And I'll just talk about an example in this context and how we also see कि ये सेम ही कहानी है जब आप करते हो तो वो स्केल पे होती है. तो दीक्षा के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जब टीचर ट्रेनिंग के डेज होते थे, राइट, तो इनिशियली पीपल वर थिंकिंग नहीं ये फीचर हो वो फीचर हो ऐसे करेंगे वैसे करेंगे, बट ultimately when one spoke with the teachers, everyone realized that all teachers have smartphones, have internet,
correct,
and are very used to watching YouTube pay videos, right?
Absolutely.
So if you now hence give them something which they can easily watch as video on Diksha about it, and in the process get trained, that's a simple change for them to do. So it's a +1.
Correct.
That happened at such a level that now when you look at it, the training of the teachers, it has become the norm. It has become irreversible. कि अब ट्रेनिंग ब्लेंडेड भी हो तो उसमें किसी तरह से स्मार्टफोन यूज होके आपका कैसे, इवन इफ फॉर रिवीजन और फॉर सीइंग सम मोर एग्जांपल्स, यू कैन use your own smartphone to go through teacher training in this context, right?
Sorry, just a comment on that. You're absolutely right. And most models really complicate things for the system. And I think what we've seen is that in under-resourced systems, complicated systems, where governance mechanisms, incentive mechanisms are hard to change, अगर आप बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल काम देने वाले हो, right, कि आप ऐसे पढ़ाते थे, अब आप इसको बिल्कुल ही बदल दो, and मतलब you have to learn an entirely new way of doing it, which is totally different from everything you've ever done, and it will take you 4 hours every day to do this. तो वो नहीं होने वाला. Right, for us, like we used the challenge in even getting teachers to make a group. अभी भी 80% teachers ही एक WhatsApp group बनाते हैं with parents, despite the system pushing them, despite everything that. Now, how are you going to expect much more? I think that's the idea, that you have to come up with models fairly simple, low effort, but which will have a lot of value, and then will quickly and will show the value so that it builds that next level of motivation. That's one part. And second, of course, find the person with the intrinsic level of motivation, right, and really tailor to that. And for us, parents were a good source of that. I think those are some strong sort of +1, right? In the for-profit sector, they always talk about building on, don't customer change their journey, don't make them put in effort. In the social sector, we have always said कि हम तो लोगों का बिल्कुल mindset ही बदल देंगे, and we have to just focus entirely on that, and that's not the easiest thing to do.
Because you spoke about parents, right? Now, conventionally, a lot of people do not think about involving parents in the activity of learning. For example, देखो तो वो ये होता है कि teacher is blaming the parent, parent is blaming the teacher. कि हमने तो स्कूल पढ़ने भेजा था, इन्होंने पढ़ाया नहीं, बच्चा ऐसा रह गया. और टीचर बोलता है पेरेंट्स घर पे कुछ कराते नहीं है, तो इसकी वजह से बच्चा पीछे रह जाता है, right? Now in this model, because you're focusing a lot on parents, right? What did you see as the shift in behavior as this was happening, which you think is going to stay with those who actually have started moving in that direction?
No, it's a great question. That's a great question. I think overall, we started working with parents because we felt that parents really have the most skin in the game and the most intrinsic motivation to want their child to succeed. That's that simple at the end of the day. Teachers are a dedicated workforce, right? But even if the child in the classroom, they will get a lot of mental satisfaction. It's not going to change their lifestyle, it's not going to change their salaries, etc. For a parent who wants to get out of poverty and also wants the child to be having a better life than them, they really have that motivation. And actually in India, luckily, thanks to a lot of campaigns, thanks to a lot of realization by people themselves, education is known as the only way out of poverty. Like people are spending money on sending their children to tuitions, to private schools, to buy various things. If you can't afford to send to a private school, a government school bhejoge, tuition lagega, even at a young age. We are seeing so much of that in preschool even. So that motivation is there. Now there are various reasons why they were not focusing on, on spending time themselves with the child. One is maybe the expectation was not there. In my peer group, I don't know anyone who spends time with the child. तो मुझे लगता है मेरा काम है स्कूल भेजना बच्चे को, उसके साथ होमवर्क करना या उसके साथ घर पे पढ़ाई करना मुझे नहीं लगता मेरा काम है, right? I don't know at this age इतना important है, ये तो खेलने के दिन है. राइट 10वीं जब पहुंचेंगे 8वीं पहुंचेंगे तब उनको हम पढ़ाएंगे राइट स्टेट बोर्ड के लिए किसी और चीज के लिए बट व्हाई एट दिस एज राइट एंड फाइनली द बिगेस्ट थिंग इज कॉन्फिडेंस वी सी दैट विद अ लॉट ऑफ पेरेंट्स हाउ कैन आई डू इट एंड देन फाइनली द फॉलोइंग ऑफ हैबिट बिल्डिंग वाली मैंने शुरू तो कर दी मैं बिजी हो गई अगले दिन कुछ हो गया कोई बीमार हो गया फोन खराब हो गया आई स्टॉप डूइंग इट नेवर गॉट इट राइट so these are genuinely big problems and it's really a paradigm shift. How do you get parents in low income sort of settings to actually spend time with the children, which is not an accepted thing there, right? And so this whole model evolved from there, but we think that the intrinsic motivation is a big deal because it has allowed us to around 30% plus of the workers of the parents that we work with, and in fact ये सारे parents in a classroom है हमारा कुछ ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई parent opt in करता है टीचर सबको ऐड कर देती है ग्रुप पे राइट उनमें से 30% एक्चुअली कंसिस्टेंटली 6 months से ज्यादा एंगेज कर रहे हैं हमारे साथ सो इफ यू लुक एट एनी सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्ट इवन फॉर द हाई इनकम अनपेड प्रोडक्ट है और मुझे रैंडमली ऐड कर दिया है हाउ मेनी प्रोडक्ट्स इन द वर्ल्ड हैव हैड अ 30% sort of thing right you can count it on probably one hand in that way and so I think that gave us a lot of inspiration yeah actually something that people are wanting they wanted some way to educate kids and that's what we are able to help them with in their own context the plus ones we here right abhi bhi matlab 60-70% शुरू करते हैं जर्नी out of the 100 and 30 continue करते हैं right and we see that there are some factors that help some plus that get a user as you asked right to be there for the long term in the journey one is कि अगर group है तो अगर पहले 2 to 4 weeks में 3 parents in the group become active तो then that creates this momentum for a group कि वो group भी long term active रहेगा राइट अगर वो 3 नहीं होते अगर 1 ही होता है अगर 1 होता है एंड टीचर ने भी उनको कुछ भी नहीं बोला कोई और पेरेंट भी कभी नहीं लगा तो दैट पेरेंट सेज आई एम द ओनली इडियट हियर जो कर रहा है राइट सो ऑफन दे विल डिप ऑफ राइट बट अगर 3 होते हैं तो वो पॉजिटिव ग्रुप इफेक्ट्स आने लग जाते हैं टीचर को भी वो आने लग जाता है कि ओ वाओ दिस इज पॉसिबल हाफ द बैटल इज टीचर के पेरेंट कुछ करने वाला है राइट एंड इफ द पेरेंट इज डूइंग समथिंग दैट टीचर सेज ओके दिस इज पॉसिबल सो दैट्स 1+1 द सेकंड one is
just a point on that you spoke about 3 sure. 3 sounds like a magic number and it kind of takes me back to conversation a long while back with Chamat who was the head of growth at Facebook, right? And he actually spoke about the fact that for us, the magic number is 7. Achha. Right? So at Facebook, if you add 7 more friends of yourself to your network, then that person becomes pretty habitual in terms of their usage at Facebook. So just that aspect came to mind in the context of what you're saying that, if there are typically 10 parents in a group, 3 become active. The moment that happens, it is a sign that this group will flourish.
Absolutely. I think that's very well put. Exactly. So a lot of our target in the beginning is 3+. You message the parents, you send a report to the teacher or whatever you do. But if you get 3+, then automatically things will happen. Second is if a user in the first month responds around 10 times to you. Right? So we call that a super user. And that user has a very, very high chance of staying with you for the next 3, 6, 9, 12. So getting them used to it in the beginning itself. And they're seeing that value. That makes a lot of the difference as well.
I am learning a lot in this conversation. Hope you are too. Which questions would you like me to ask? What areas would you like me to explore further? Please write to me at gaurav@takestep.org. So very interesting articulation, Azeez. In fact, इसमें मतलब जो चीज मेरे को सबसे ज्यादा अपील कर रही थी, right? The fact that you were focusing on the intrinsic motivation of the parents. Right now, of course, that intrinsic motivation in parents can manifest itself in many different forms. And I think one of the aspects that we see is that because the payoff in education happens over a very long period of time in terms of improving both the learning or the earning potential of the child. So a lot of people lose that motivation with time. So especially when you speak about those 30% odd parents and their intrinsic motivation, which is helping drive this and they are hence continuing in that journey, how does it manifest itself? And when I say that, let me articulate what I'm looking to hear here is intrinsic motivation के नाम पे parents क्या बोलते हैं कि हमारे यहाँ बच्चे के साथ अब ये हमें दिखने लगा है, which is really exciting us. So what are some of those reactions?
Yeah, that's perfectly said. वो दो चीजें चाहिए होती हैं what we've seen right for that motivation to sustain. One is कि बच्चे में कुछ change चाहिए होता है and I'll talk about some of the changes that we hear about quite often. Right, and दूसरा is the child should enjoy it. So in fact that is one of the mistakes that we made early on. We said कि look, the child is never going to compete with Chota Bheem और मोटू पतलू और सम ऑफ दीज, राइट? तो इंटरटेनिंग बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप एकेडमिक बना दो, पेरेंट को कन्विंस कर लोगे, पेरेंट विल देन मेक श्योर द चाइल्ड डज इट, राइट? वी मेड अ कंटेंट इन दैट वे एंड देन वी सॉ के अगर बच्चा डेली रेजिस्ट कर रहा है तो देन पेरेंट विल स्टॉप यार, मतलब इवेंचुअली द लो इनकम पेरेंट विल से कि यार अब मेरे पास इतना टाइम नहीं है कि मैं रोते हुए बच्चे को डेली कुछ करवा रहा हूँ, राइट? इफ दे आर फाइंडिंग इट बोरिंग देन द पेरेंट आल्सो गो अवे. And so we made focusing a lot more on making it simple, fun thing for the child. And now with our super users, the most common thing we hear is कि in nearly every field visit I go to, the super users will say at least 2-3 तो मिलेंगे जो बोलेंगे कि मेरे पास खुद ही मेरी बच्ची आती है और पूछती है कि आज का काम आया क्या, आज का होमवर्क आया क्या, आज का सर्टिफिकेट जिसमें स्माइली मिल रहा है आया क्या. Right, so she follows up with me rather than the reverse, and that is a huge game changer. Matlab, that's the number one game changer. That they should like it, they should feel motivated, and all. That's one. In terms of the parental change, I think many of them talk about the relationship with the child has changed. They feel closer to the child, and the child feels closer to them because they're doing something together as a group activity, which they were not doing before. I think the confidence of the parent also changes. Often mothers and fathers also will say कि we never thought कि हम बच्चे को पढ़ा सकते हैं, हम कभी पढ़ाते नहीं, तो हमें वो सीख मिल गई है कि हम भी पढ़ा सकते हैं बच्चे को, we can play a role as well. So this is pretty incredible. मतलब in fact that child is going to school today now after COVID, वो ट्यूशन भी जाते हैं, लेकिन तब भी वो mothers उनके साथ आधा घंटा 1 घंटा करवा रही हैं learning. So I think that feeling of closeness, they say child बच्चा अच्छी confident हो गई है, वो ज्यादा बात कर पा रही है, ज्यादा बोल रही है. And we're still trying to experiment and figure out ways of how to communicate कि चलो ठीक है, उसको पहले कोई भी alphabet नहीं आता था, अब उसको 10 alphabets आते हैं, for example. That's a harder one to sell, honestly, and I don't think we have figured it out fully. But I think a lot of the psychological change, social change in the child, they're able to see. Some are very sharp also. They say कि वो बच्चा मुझे पता है कि अब वो स्कूल जाएगी तो वो क्लास में बैठ पाएगी, उसको वो डिसिप्लिन आ रहा है कुछ चीज में बैठ के एक एक्टिविटी करने का या कुछ पढ़ाई करने का, मुझे पता है वो स्कूल में कर लिया. आई वाज माइंड ब्लोन बिकॉज स्कूल रेडीनेस में ये बात होती है कि एकेडमिक्स टॉक अबाउट दिस कि क्लास 1 में जाके बहुत बच्चे तो बैठ ही नहीं पाते, वो फोकस ही नहीं कर पाते, बट एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन का अंडरस्टैंडिंग फॉर अ मदर टू हैव हु सॉर्ट ऑफ क्लास 8 पास and that's it. I think we severely underestimated how people would be able to see and whether they would be able to see these changes.
Right. So that's very powerful, Azeez, because I think this entire angle that the relationship of the parent with the child is changing in this, right? And then, of course, in the process, the child is also becoming more confident, more capable, and hence these kind of reactions. That's very, very powerful because I think if not for anything, that itself can be a good reason for a lot of parents to be doing this because it changes your relationship with the child.
Absolutely. You're right. And in fact, a lot of studies these days are showing कि कभी-कभी preschool अगर start करते हो अच्छा preschool, the global sort of in the global north, etc., or even in the developing world are showing कि कई बारी short term academic scores में impact नहीं दिख रहा है, very interestingly, but long term college completion, school completion, college completion, incomes में दिख रहा है. So something pretty intangible is also happening to the child, whether it's executive function, whether it's social emotional skills, whatever you call it. But a lot of these things are happening that are showing even sometimes they're showing in short term also, but कई बार वो long term में दिखती है. So it's very interesting, and these functions of positive childhood experiences, parents and children coming together. There's a lot of research now that shows that the ratio of childhood experiences, डांट पड़ गई बहुत ज्यादा, किसी ने छेड़ दिया, versus positive childhood experiences. It could be a powerful learning moment, it could be some love that you got, that is manifesting in your entire personality and confidence and how you live life going forward, right? So I mean, I'm going into very touchy-feely sort of stuff, right? We always generally as an org pride ourselves on measuring learning outcomes, behavior change very quantitatively, but there are a lot of these other factors that are interesting also.
In fact, मेरे को तो honestly ये लगता है कि it is these other factors which are more important because वो अगर ठीक से होने लग जाएंगे तो learning outcomes अपने आप improve करने लग जाएंगे. But that's completely my take. Anyway, so won't stick to that. I'll rather try to ask you some questions in the context of something very interesting that you mentioned, which is conventionally we think about doing things in a very academic fashion, but when you make them simple, fun, humorous, it really changes the way the kids engage with that. And you also described this as one of the early mistakes that you made, and then you kind of corrected that. So actually, you're selling two questions, Azeez. Ek,
Okay.
humor, simple, fun wala element hai. What else have you seen in this space which kind of brings it out even more strongly, and hence what more needs to be done for that. The other question is, what are the other mistakes that you have done that you're proud of?
Right. Uh, yeah, I think in terms of making it fun and engaging and so on, I think that's been always a very interesting and tricky balance for us to maintain. But it's been made easier for us because we are dealing with the 3 to 8 year old age group, where especially in 3 to 6, a lot of learning is done experientially and by just doing simple things in the world around you. And so it makes it easier. In fact, in grades 1, 2, 3, थोड़ा कभी भी मुश्किल हो जाता है, right? Because you do have to teach a particular concept, they build on top of each other. तो इतना easy नहीं होता. मतलब you have to sort of make sure that that is also happening. Whereas in preschool में तो it's not so many prerequisites. It's doing a bunch of different things at different times, and that works. So I think we find the concept of rhymes, stories, poems, all of those are super popular. I think children love hearing new things, and sometimes the novelty is this कि मैं मछली जल की रानी है तो कर रही थी, लेकिन I didn't know बंदर मामा, which is a very different thing, right? So my set of fun things, entertaining things that I can use with my child, that is increasing a lot, right? So I think that is a big part of it. A lot of things can be reinvented. I feel that often we have all these design principles now. We've really seen users do stuff. Even worksheets, colorful ho, fun ho, to log kar lete hain. Most print books that are even given. We learned this using digital worksheets, but we believe that this works in print also. No worksheet should have more than 10 words. अगर 10 words से ज़्यादा है तो people are getting bored and are not doing it, right? So I think there are a lot of sort of simple principles that can make things easy for users and make them fun for users. We often send group activities, that is another thing that makes it fun. We send things for siblings to do, बड़ा भाई या बहन करते हैं छोटे भाई बहन से. We see around 20% of our activities are done by बड़ा भाई बहन. They are often more savvy with the phone. तो पेरेंट फोन अपने क्लास 8 के दे देगा कि आप ये क्लास 1 के बच्चे के साथ कर लो, which is fun for both of them, right? So sometimes those things are interesting, and then we give them certificates and so on. Report card में smiley आता है for the day that you send back a response and blank otherwise. And we run this campaign called कितने smiley मिले, and we go, and this is huge recall feature, right? Smiley. Another thing we started seeing is कि एक टीचर करती थी कि अगर कोई बच्चे ने उस दिन में कुछ भेजा तो शाम को एक वो चोको इमोजी भेजती थी, चॉकलेट का इमोजी भेजती थी. And we automated that, and we started sending chocolate emojis to anyone who did something on a particular day. And बच्चे कह रहे हैं कि we are getting these chocolate emojis. One interesting thing was कि एक छोटी लड़की कह रही है अपने मदर को कि चोको वहां मिला, आप मुझे चॉकलेट market se do. So all those are interesting, right? And sometimes those can be slightly difficult for the parent also, but those are things. So I think those are on the fun part. I think on the second question, which is about the other mistakes, I think we made a lot of them, right? I think one of our core values as an org has been bias to action, being ready to fail. In fact, every sort of months as an org, we have a failure huddle in which every person in the organization talks about some major failure that they've done. And for us, there have been many because we have experimented with many of them. I think one big mistake that I can point out that we made was not focusing on the child specifically at that point. So that was one. It haven't worked out. Like one big thing in famous cricketer in our early days, in the first few months of our program. And we thought that we'll send this inspirational video with the cricketer to all the parents on our WhatsApp groups, and that might help change mindsets. Okay, look, the famous cricketer is also doing things with the child, so we should also. And we banked a lot on it, and we didn't really see much recall of that, right? People didn't really understand it, people were missing it, and all of that, right? So I think that was something that we learned from, that we have to run these campaigns in a slightly different way. Another was we assume that all users are going to look at each piece of content that comes every day and every piece of content. And so we weren't repeating things, right? We were just going very, very fast. And we saw that users are not like that. Sometimes we miss kar dete hain, wo second day. And then we started this whole concept of saying we have to recap, we have to create spirals of content, jahan dobara repeat kare in different ways the same concept. So even if you miss it on days, you can do it another day. Maybe you can have recaps on Sunday where we send ki ye is hafte ka ye recap hai, you can do this. So all those are big mistakes, and that line of mistakes is huge, right? Abhi hum keh rahe hain ki any sort of message that we send on any of the groups should be less than 20 words. In the first 2 years, hamare sare text messages 50 words se. We realize now कि probably कोई वो text message पढ़ ही नहीं रहा था, खाली videos देख रहे थे, right? So these are things that we have learned over time.
Got it. And that's quite fascinating, and especially I find that idea of doing a failure hurdle really powerful, because I think when we work with corporates or even in social sector, typically people don't want to fail, right? And that hence means you don't acknowledge failure, or at times you don't even celebrate failure. But I think if one does that more often, that changes the game. So I think this construct of failure hurdle to discuss and to talk about it and do that is really fascinating. But Azeez, अच्छा, ये बताओ कि ये जब ये mistakes हुए, ये failure हुए, ये learnings हुए, right? Now, I'm sure in a way, somewhere that navigation compass or, the kind of principles that now that define the focus of rocket learning, they might have changed over time. Have you seen that happen? I mean, and hence, what are they now?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have luckily remained steadfast, right? In terms of trying to look at peer effects, trying to use a large system and their resources. So ये सब constant रही है. अभी भी हम B2G है, B2G2C. We are trying to leverage the system that exists. We don't have any direct implementation model at all. एक भी जगह नहीं है जहाँ हम directly किसी बच्चे के साथ काम कर रहे हैं and all that. So some of these have remained constant. I think one thing that we have sort of tried to do much more, and we thought that we were doing it earlier, but we realized kitna nahi tha, is to make sure that everything with the user that we work with is really closely tested and we are taking their thoughts and their interests into account. So wo, I think, has been something that we have learned over the past year even. Often we would do things that were based on our hypothesis. We are close to the ground. We do feel कि हमें काफी कुछ पता है, but we still don't know enough the user and there's no playbook to build off, right? ऐसा most product, user experience, user love research has been done on the high income. Byju's देख रहा है कि child most expensive private school को क्या चाहिए. For us, like even learning like what emojis things work, even that was something we couldn't pick up from anywhere. हमें खुद जाके वो research workshop करना पड़ा, focus group करना पड़ा. हम एक साल, हम एक डेढ़ साल हम gold, silver, bronze medals भेज रहे थे. We learned कि हरियाणा में तो gold, silver, bronze चल जाता है because they send lots of Olympic champions, right? मतलब तो उन्होंने देखा हुआ है. इनफैक्ट वहां बच्चे बोलते हैं कि गोल्ड मिल रहा है तो साथ में नेशनल एंथम भी बजना चाहिए मेरे लिए. That's the sort of feedback we get. So it really is memorable for people, right? वो नेशनल एंथम चाहते हैं साथ में. But in Maharashtra, where for example there's not such a Olympics culture, तो gold, silver, bronze उनको नहीं पता था क्या होता है. Because if you imagine, right, वो कहाँ in daily life are you seeing gold, silver, bronze? मतलब किसी और sport में तो होता नहीं है. And then in your school you are not getting gold, silver, bronze, or in the village you are not seeing anyone get it. So we have had to change that. Say कि हम उसको कैसे, what do we give them that they'll value as an incentive? So I think basically what has changed, the navigation sort of principle is कि everything we do has to be quite closely tested. Especially now that we are working with 1 million users, we are on 60,000 classrooms. In fact, we have a separate product now focused on Anganwadi workers as well. So I think in that way, this is something that we are now really absorbing very, very fast.
Well, that's really fascinating, Azeez, because in a way that's the evolution or the journey of a startup, right? In terms of how you start to how things evolve. So,
and we all say, customer first, user first, all of that. हम हमेशा सब बोलते तो हैं, हमें लगता भी है हम हैं. But I think sometimes there are different levels that you need to get in, especially with some of these. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, absolutely, Azeez. Because I think कहने के लिए आसान होता है, लेकिन करने में मुश्किल होता है. Right. And that's where I think organizations surface such principles, which is what really kind of makes them very powerful and very, in a way, defines the culture of the organization. So very interesting. Now, a question which is more towards you, because earlier in the conversation, you spoke about how the digitalization in the country has really evolved, right? People have smartphones, people have internet, and you spoke about those percentages in that context. Now, question linked to that, so that is like the base digital infra in a way. Right?
Yeah.
What do you envisage as the base digital infra that should come through in the near future? So, for example, internet, GPS, Aadhaar, all of these are now base digital infra that everyone, at least in India, has access to pretty much. What else do you envisage coming through in the future, which can help rocket learning as well as the users of the propositions that you bring out?
Yeah, I think one major thing that we are seeing is that the mother smartphone is very useful, right? So having 2 smartphones in the family, I think that becomes a real game changer. You can make it work with one smartphone also. There are many dedicated parents who, even if the father is going to work, taking the phone, whoever is staying at home, it's the grandparent, where it's the mother, are noting it down, doing it, फिर घर के end पे photo लेते हैं, right? ऐसे बहुत हैं. But we see कि अगर घर पे एक स्मार्टफोन है तो that is really कोई ना टाइम मिल जाएगा for the child to be able to learn using it. So I think that second smartphone, a dedicated smartphone for school or whatever you call it, right? I think that is going to be a big deal, right? I think the second thing is that even our states and governments look towards providing digital infra, I think making sure that you're not prescribing strict rules on it is going to be very critical. We have seen a lot of places where आपने smartphone तो दे दिया है, whether it's to a parent, whether it's to a teacher, आंगनबाड़ी worker, but डेटा नहीं दिया है या उस पे आप certain apps नहीं allow कर रहे हो, आप बोल रहे हो बस यही ऐप होना चाहिए, ऐसा होना चाहिए. अगर ऐसा होगा तो फिर लोग यूज नहीं करते वाला प्रोडक्ट, राइट? वो दो फोन्स क्यों यूज करें अगर मतलब one of them is going to be so painful. And so often database के अंदर you'll have the number of the official phone, but official phone को यूज नहीं करा because वो यूज करने का एक्सपीरियंस ही इतना खराब है, मेंटेनेंस भी नहीं होती है and all, right? So I think having a structure where whoever is providing this is saying कि ठीक है, we let the user use it sensibly, right? We not to worry कि वो इसका सारा डेटा यूज कर लेंगे YouTube वीडियोस पे, इसलिए मैं YouTube नहीं डाउनलोड करने दे रहा या WhatsApp पे कर देंगे तो मैं WhatsApp नहीं करने दे रहा. So I think one thing is second smartphone. The other thing is sort of creating an open network or open possibility on whatever device that you're supporting.
Fascinating, Azeez. I mean, the entire conversation in terms of how you candidly walk through the journey was really fascinating. So just pitching to ask this final question now. What has been your favorite aha moment so far in the journey?
Actually, there are quite a few, but because I haven't been able to talk too much about our model that is now focused on helping teachers and Anganwadi workers teach in the classroom. Because we have over the last 1 year started developing this program that is being used by where we are sending a couple of videos to a preschool teacher or Anganwadi worker कि आप classroom में ये दो चीजें पढ़ा दो आज, right? Which is focused on groups in the classroom, on materials that are in the classroom, right? So very simple, and it's sent on these groups of the teacher. So very similar to the parent model, but it's focused on the teacher. Again, it's on WhatsApp, and the supervisor or the teacher is on the group. So they play the role of the facilitator, right? In the same way that the teacher does on the parent. तो एक ये मॉडल है. एंड 1 year ago our group had a aha moment because we started seeing post COVID कि कुछ जो रेगुलरली करते थे एक्टिविटीज, वो एक्टिविटीज करना उन्होंने रोक दिया है, वो वापस कुछ भेजते नहीं ग्रुप्स पे. तो we called them and said कि क्या हो गया, are you not thinking that this is important anymore, what happened? And they said कि नहीं, हमें तो लगता है important है, लेकिन वो ऑलरेडी बच्चा क्लास में करके आ रहा है, हम क्या करवाएं? They're already doing that activity. And then we learned that these teachers and Anganwadi workers are actually using this content जो parents के लिए है, मतलब उसका पूरा messaging है इसको वो parent use करना चाहिए, homework है, but they were using it in the classrooms. So that was a big aha moment for us कि अगर आप किसी यूजर को टारगेट भी नहीं कर रहे लेकिन वो उठा के उस चीज को यूज करने लग गए. So that is just mind blowing, right? Because that speaks to intrinsic motivation and demand for a particular product. They are taking that product. And so that was a huge aha in our mind, which convinced us there is some value, especially in the preschool segment where there's not much out there for the teacher, community worker, where they don't know much, but they want to be teachers, but they've not been trained, where they've not done these resources, where they've not spent 25 years as a teacher and don't feel like they know everything, right? Which is often the case with a different category of teacher. Then there's some value in creating a focused product to help them with what they are needing clearly. So that was a big aha moment. And I think often these sorts of user moments, जहाँ वो कुछ particular behavior demonstrate कर देते हैं, जहाँ you didn't never expect that, you didn't build for that, but then you notice it and then you start building for it. I think that was a big one recently.
It's kind of very insightful, right? That all of a sudden that you didn't anticipate something like this to happen, and it happened. It's like discovering a new use case altogether from that aha moment. So very fascinating.
Exactly.
Thank you, Azeez. Thank you so much for your patience, your time, and walking us through that journey. It was really fascinating. I'm sure our listeners will also have a lot of fun listening to the journey that you went through. And some of those experiences, especially the things that you spoke about, the kind of reactions that parents had or even the teachers had when such a thing happened. So very, very in terms of what's unfolding. Wish you all the success. And would love to see Rocket Learning really grow much bigger and bigger and help achieve the mission that you are really going after. So thank you so much for the candid conversation.
Thanks so much, Gaurav. I think we've been very inspired by the X-Step journey, the Diksha journey. I think the first product that really showed widespread adoption at scale in government schools, etc. So thanks a lot for leading the way, and pleasure chatting with you for sure.
Same here, pleasure.
I unlocked a lot of possibilities in this conversation. Hope it did the same for you. Which leaders would you like me to meet? What would you like me to ask them? Please write to me at gaurav@xstep.org.